Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Arctic Connections, where we bring the Arctic to people and people to the Arctic. Today, we sit down with Randy Church-Key, the director of the Ted Stevens Center for Arctic Security Studies. He's a retired Major General from the U.S. Air Force with 30 and change years of experience as a uniformed officer and some years since in leadership positions where you focused most of your time on the Arctic and on Arctic security. Today, we'll find out where the Stevens Center has been, where it's at, and where it's going as we head into 2024. And we'll find out what this year might portend, not only for the Arctic, but for the center and how the center might interact with some of the ongoings in the Arctic itself. But before we get into specifics about the center, Church, let's explore how we got here. Let's kind of lay the strategic foundation for why the center might exist. So let's just set an Arctic table for a minute. The largest Arctic nation, at least by landmass, that being Russia, is waging the largest land war since World War II. NATO, the world's largest and strongest military alliance, just accepted or is accepting 2 new members, both of which are Arctic countries. China and Russia, America's pacing and acute threats, respectively, are deepening their partnership specifically in and through the Arctic. Arctic energy, Arctic shipping, Arctic military operations, Arctic Coast Guard cooperation. I'm sure we could go on. At the same time, the Arctic is warming and thus changing faster than anywhere else on the planet. This is disrupting patterns of life, altering fish runs, changing migration patterns, opening sea routes, increasing traffic. Again, that list could go on. And just this week, Russia is once again saber-rattling with Helsinki. Not coincidentally, the U.S. and Finland entered into a defense agreement, and China is pushing its northern sea route traffic to even new highs. And the U.S. is making a new extended continental shelf claim in the Arctic. This is all happening, and there's the Ted Stevens Center. So before we get into where the Ted Stevens Center is at and where it's going, maybe just tell us, from your experience, where we're at as a nation in context of everything that's going on in the Arctic world.
And you want that in just a few minutes?
Just a few minutes to get us started.
Okay. Well, thank you, Matt. And first of all, thanks to you and the Stevens Center team for putting together this Arctic Connections. This is an important conversations that need to be taking place in order to bring in a whole panoply of voices to avoid the aspect of creating, if you will, an Arctic security echo chamber. So the idea of a diversity of perspectives matter. And I appreciate you and the team, specifically the engagement team, that's been really focused to try to help, leverage the power of digital programming to bring important conversations forward to get that, for the diversity of views, and from that, hopefully people can draw some conclusions for policy, for out to the practitioner community, for those folks that are studying the Arctic from multiple vantage points and more. So this is an important construct to help facilitate, hopefully, important conversations about the Arctic. The Arctic. As when you think about the importance of the Arctic, from obviously the United States has been an Arctic nation since 1867. Alaska represents America's Arctic salient. And ultimately, it's because of America's Arctic interests that you have a strong voice within the NATO context for the Arctic region. The United States, Canada, Iceland, Norway, Denmark, Finland, and Sweden hopefully very, very soon. They're on the precipice of becoming a NATO member, but at least 6 of the 7 like-minded nations of the Arctic all see the challenges from a fairly common lens, if you will, when you look at the defense and security concerns. But you hit on it. The aspect of this, security and defense are just about one facet of so many lines of activities that drive the overall Arctic equation. So when I look at today in America's Arctic interests, you've hit on all of them, frankly, or at least most of them. And that, of course, is we of course need to make sure that we're going to have successfully to protect and defend our interests. We surely got to make sure that we've got the defense portion of the equation well nailed down. We need to think of what what the people have called the Arctic home since time began, and that is really the Arctic indigenous community, whose livelihoods are threatened not only from the geostrategic challenges, but also that aspect of geophysical changes. So Arctic people, Arctic citizens, Arctic indigenous in particular, our Arctic interests start with our citizens and ultimately the community of citizens of the like-minded nations and their secured futures from both the traditional security and defense lens, but also the aspects of security relates to food, to economics, to energy, to environment, and even to cultural. When you think about the whole math equation, of course, as a math major, I always look at it from a math lens to start with, but really is to me, it really is from my vantage point, America's interests to the Arctic region are multifaceted. They're growing in importance. It's because if you look at how much the geophysical changes are actually driving so much of the reduction of the barriers of access to the Arctic region, that's been underway for quite some time, and it's not necessarily surprising to folks who study the Arctic. But at the end of the day, what that lower barrier of access is providing is a chance for like-minded nations to do more to protect and defend, but also it makes it easier for those countries that are not Arctic specialists to come in and meddle and or make a mess and or threaten our strategic national interests.
We could probably go on with any one of those categories, and as we progress here, we'll dive into some of the specifics on that. But I think what would be really beneficial to some of our listeners now is to find out where the Stevens Center fits within all of this. In 2021, Defense Secretary Austin said when establishing the center, it will address the need for U.S. engagement and international cooperation to strengthen the rules-based order in the region and tackle shared challenges such as climate change. He then gave the center 4 mission areas. Can you elaborate a little bit on the 4 mission areas that the Secretary of Defense specifically gave the center to go execute?
You bet. First of all, those are critical, foundational directives for the center. And so Secretary Austin asked us to advance the professionalizing of Arctic service, to include, of course, the United States, which is uniquely different for a DoD regional center. Most DoD regional 5 of the 6 DoD regional centers do not have a domestic mission set assigned by the Secretary. We do. And that involves professionalizing U.S. Arctic service, as well as Arctic service of our allies and partners, those coming from the Arctic nations themselves, but also those Arctic-minded interested nations that contribute to common defense as allies and partners. So professionalizing Arctic service, both for the United States and allies and partners. Supporting and advancing DoD's Arctic priorities. And ultimately from this is actually getting at what, there's a new DoD Arctic strategy coming out soon, being led by our dear friend and certainly partner in the Arctic, and that is, of course, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Arctic and Global Resilience, Ms. Iris Ferguson, and her team in the Pentagon. And then, of course, the next charge would be that is supporting the rules-based order of the Arctic. And this is where the DoD Regional Center power to intervene can really be helping establish those networks that benefit and the support to the rules-based order.
So I want to get a little bit into DoD bureaucracy jargon.
Yes, okay, that's fair.
Where does the TSC fall within that construct? My understanding is that all regional centers are aligned with the combatant command, but they also receive strategic guidance from a different office in the Pentagon. Where does the TSC fall within all of that? And then perhaps, in addition to, you could elaborate on who are the other stakeholders in this equation?
That's a great question. First of all, I guess when you look at what the Stevens Center is, we're a contributor. We are folks that are in a dedicated team that's oriented to aspects of executive education, research analysis, and engagement outreach contributing all those three mission spaces to support the Department of Defense as the department tries to help defend those Arctic interests for our nation and ultimately partnership with allies and partners. But when you look at the bureaucracy of the department, it's a consequential bureaucracy, to be sure. But we're unique. If you look at, the regional centers are uniquely oriented as instruments of both policy and security cooperation. We are assigned, each of the regional centers are assigned at the Assistant Secretary of Defense level. So the Stevens Center reports to the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Homeland Defense and Hemisphere Affairs. And we are aligned to the command responsible for the defense of the homeland, U.S. Northern Command, who's also the Department of Defense's Arctic advocate from that of a command vantage point. We're executive agencies provided for each regional center by Defense Security Cooperation Agency, DSCA, as DSCA provides essentially the nation's centerpiece for the security cooperation enterprise. In fact, the authorities for DoD regional centers come from the sections of Chapter 16, Title 10 U.S. Code, that aspects of security cooperation. So we are, by authorities from the Congress, enabled by the SecDef, really, and as championed by the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Homeland Defense, Hemisphere Affairs, in concert with the alignment from Commander U.S. Northern Command, to be able to help support those elements that advance our security and defense, weighting, if you will, those efforts towards defense, simply because of the nature of the competitive nature of the Arctic region at this point.
So aligned with NORTHCOM, strategic guidance from the Pentagon, OSD Policy Shop, Executive Agent, Defense Security Cooperation Agencies, with stakeholders in other combatant commands, EUCOM and DOPACOM, seeing how the Arctic is interconnected and sometimes even a-regional, so cross-functional perhaps. So other commands, TRANSCOM comes to mind, STRATCOM come to mind. But if you go outside of the building, we have stakeholders, I'd imagine, with the State Department, with the Homeland Security, and the list could go on and on. And we're only talking domestic right now.
I know. Giddy up.
Yeah. Well, I want to get into partners and allies here in a second,
Okay.
but you mentioned something about authorities. In the center itself is equipped with particular authorities. But from what I understand, we just had some recent news that gave the director of the center, or the center, a director, which then gives that individual particular authority. So I think a congratulations is in order for yourself, the newly appointed and officially appointed director of the Stevens Center. But you've had a lot of titles in your career, and it's not about the title. I know that, and I think anybody who knows you knows that. What does the title of director provide to the center? What authorities does it now give the director, you, to help lead this center to where it needs to go?
For a great set of reflections, and to be honest with you, if I could just take a moment to pause on the list of partners and collaborators. At the end of the day, this is about achieving unity of effort that benefits our national interests, but in concert with our allies and partners. And then we look at the United States as a community that's focused on security and also, obviously, that elements of defense. The desire to really be a cross-connector, a convener, a convergent point so people can, from different departments and agencies, can work towards common purpose, especially in those areas that relate to security and defense. When you go to the aspects of a director, really it's certainly about not me personally, although I'm privileged and honored to serve as the director of this center, and I'm honored by that, truly. And I truly, though, believe that strategically the center will benefit by having a duly appointed director with the authorities therein to execute what's been provided by the Congress in Section 342 and 2611 of that Chapter 16, Title 10. That's so important. Without that director, you have no legal authority to commit to memorandums of understanding, memorandums of agreement. Contractual relationships are harder. We have been, of course, in the interim period from the 23rd of August, 2021, until just a few days ago, we've been operating on the auspices of a senior advisor for Arctic Security Affairs vested by the SecDef to conduct the establishment and early operation of the center. But that we could not have achieved what we have been able, thankfully, to achieve had it not been for some wonderful folks that have helped us get by while waiting to establish a director established. In particular, DSCA, our colleagues at the Defense Security Cooperation Agency has been providing executive agency support as much as they can legally do to the center, even without a director established, by relying on the directional authority, the direction authority of the Daniel K. Inouye Center for Asia Pacific Security Studies, located in Waikiki. If it was not for the Inouye Center, the Stevens Center would have had a hard time getting anything done, because those things that required a director would have not been realized unless the Admiral Guwentutato, who serves as the director of the Inouye Center, had not provided his unbridled support to our center, and ultimately enabled me to serve as much as a de facto director during the last 28 months as he could possibly achieve. So the center owes him and the Ike Pono team anyway an awful lot of thanks, and enduring thanks and appreciation.
Well, cross-regional center cooperation there's literally cross-cutting guidance given to all the regional centers. Part of the guidance is to work amongst each other to get things done. That's kind of part of the essence of security cooperation. I think it's important for us to emphasize some of your background that inevitably ended up with you being in this position. At one of many assignments you had was the J5 of EUCOM, where you were oversaw strategy plans and policy. While there, presumably, you solidified a lot of your assumptions of the value of security cooperation while in that seat, recognizing it was a few years ago. Not that long ago, but a few years ago. We won't date it too much. But today, I have to imagine that belief, considering what's happening around the world, not just in Europe on its eastern flank, or even the developments on its northern flank, more in our AO, if you will, but just around the world as strategic competition's on the rise, global great power competition is back, if you will, that the value of security cooperation, the value of partners and allies never went low and was disvalued or undervalued, but maybe it was a stock that was falling for a little while. Just there wasn't much to pin it against or pair it against. But you probably never lost faith in the whole value of it all based on your position as the J5, and even more so now. What is the value of partners and allies, and why do security cooperation?
Oh my goodness, Matt. So I'll be honest with you, it goes much further back than that. Yeah. And so for me, all the way back to serving as a detachment commander for the Sarajevo Air Bridge as a young 03, working in a multinational airlift effort. They were directly command and controlling the Sarajevo Air Bridge from Falconeri Air Station in Ancona, Italy, into Sarajevo, between the United States, Germany, United Kingdom, Netherlands, Sweden, just in Canada, where all of us were in this joint air operations cell in Kona that actually got front level seat in the value of working together, allies and partners in a multinational, if you will, at the time, humanitarian relief operation. Many times over, I had privilege of serving. I spent just under half of my tenure of service overseas in one form or another, in garrison command duties, and then also in expeditionary operations. A couple of years deployed, but each of that overseas experience, I saw front seat the aspects of the power of security cooperation and building partner capacity, working together as allies and partners, to me, many times under NATO, but also saw, for example, the opportunity to serve together with our allies in Japan by being stationed there and working with the Japanese Self-Defense Force and others. So well before becoming the J5 and J8, by the way, which is because J5 wasn't being painful enough, we had the J8 as well, but at the which is capability. So, but strategically, we look at the value proposition of security cooperation, and this is where I think Director Hirsch and his team, is also Defense Security Cooperation University President Celeste Ward Gaventer, my apologies. But Celeste and Jim have really championed the aspect about the value of the security cooperation enterprise as a centerpiece in the value proposition the department makes with our allies and partners. Have it not been for the construct and tools of security cooperation, I think our nation loses when it comes upon our influence in the world. And I think ultimately The value of security cooperation gives the United States our asymmetric value advantage over our competitors, especially when we think about the strength of the world's greatest alliance in the history of mankind, NATO. So this is
well, the old adage of the only thing worse than fighting with allies is fighting without them, right?
Yes, sir. But I love our allies and partners, so you can't even get me to go there.
Let's turn to a different sort of partner, and in a critical component of the Stevens Center is its involvement of indigenous voices, indigenous people, indigenous voices, indigenous perspectives. At the center, there are leaders and staff that come from the Alaska Native community. There are faculty or adjunct faculty contributors to some of the curricula. We, as a center, have gone out into the U.S. Arctic and across the Arctic and involved a variety of indigenous voices, to use that figure of speech. Can you elaborate not so much, well, perhaps a little bit on who specifically, if you'd like, but more so the why? Why this is something that is necessary for the success and really integral to the success of the center, but also to the success of our new national strategy for the Arctic region and everything else that entails.
That's a great springboard for conversation. I do strongly believe that you cannot look through the lens of security and defense for the Arctic region unless you understand the perspective of what the Arctic Indigenous community brings to the table. People have insights about the region literally since time began. We are the diversity of voices across the North American Arctic, but also considering, and that includes, of course, Greenland, Canada, the United States. But then you look to the transatlantic aspects, the Nordic countries, and those indigenous voices, that there you get different perspectives and great insights because of, if you will, the culture of 10,000 years of understanding what the Arctic is about. To gain insights about local and place-based knowledge, the cultural aspects about the Arctic region, when you think about the value sets that all go all the way back to, for example, on the misfortunes of Arctic exploration of Europeans and ultimately some Americans in trying to advance the farthest north. Those explorers that learned the ways of the Inuit and other Arctic indigenous communities and applied the technologies were the ones that were successful. Roald Amundsen is just one classic example. And you look at today, it's always wise if you try to gain the insights of people who understand the Arctic region, because first and foremost, it's where they've called home and they had the benefit of generations of insights being passed down. To me, when I look at the diversity from, so the indigenous communities of the Aleutians, which have a much different operating environment than that of the North Slope of Alaska, ultimately as across the continental, the northern North America's continental shield, to the aspects of Greenland, which has a very different operating environment, and then aspects of the Sami peoples who have different cultural experiences in the Nordic countries. Each of those communities brings such a diversity of insights and so much wisdom and knowledge. Why is it the people who are worried about defense to listen to those folks who understand the Arctic from such a comprehensive view? Mm-hmm. And we want to make sure that we continue to bake in at the foundational level in the center that diversity of views and making the Arctic Indigenous, we're inviting the Arctic Indigenous community to be investors and partners to help us see this and to help teach others so that others can benefit by their knowledge and wisdom and understanding.
I mentioned the NSAR in my previous remarks, the National Strategy for the Arctic Region, NSAR. The NSAR not only includes what we just talked about, the inclusion of and the involvement of the indigenous community. Interestingly enough, it also specifically references the center, the Stevens Center, within the implementation plan, which is unique for a regional center. From what I understand, the other regional centers aren't necessarily incorporated in the implementation plan. Now, not every region of the planet has a national strategy, but the fact that the center itself is written into the implementation plan of a national strategy is certainly must be significant to the center to see it in the writing that says the center will do this or is called upon to do a particular thing. For example, it calls for the TSC to develop security-related educational programs for U.S. and international participants. How is the center tackling these call-outs? How are we implementing the implementation plan as it has asked us to do?
Well, that's a great question to ask, and it's a privilege to respond to it. First of all, I'd like to back up. It was actually when the National Strategy for the Arctic region rolled out on the 7th of October, 2022. We were honored to be included in the core strategy.
In the original strategy.
Yeah. And
then we survived to the implementation plan.
That's right. By the grace of by grace we go. Strategically, the NSAR though is really the aspects of the authors of the NSAR saw the Stevens power to convene, again per the congressional language that has regional centers being equipped with the power to convene. So the NSAR picked up on that legislation and thought that the White House and ultimately the federal agencies could benefit by calling out that authority, not just for the Department of Defense, but obviously starting the Department of Defense, but including other departments, because again, it's a national strategy as opposed to a departmental one. So then you move forward 1 year later to the implementation plan. And the implementation plan really highlights through our mission areas of executive education, which I would categorize as practitioner-focused education, and then the aspects of research analysis, and then engagement outreach. And leveraging our already planned, for me, it's whether you'd rather be lucky or rather be good. We're lucky that we are building a center that actually fit into this construct. And in this, we built 3 mission areas that went to each of these authorities. And since the framers of the NSAR and the NSAR implementation plan references things that were already built into our authority base, that makes it easy for us to be tailor-making our activities to support that implementation plan. One of the other aspects about this is that it's not just about within the U.S., but with our allies and partners, and then within the U.S., those mechanisms that facilitate collaboration multinationally from the Arctic region are also things that we were leveraged to support as well, which includes the International Cooperative Engagement Program for Polar Research, ICE Paper, which involves, of course, Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Canada, United States, and New Zealand. So we are working in the aspects of how to make a polar aspect to this because of ICE Paper, but the weathering elements of this is really focused out in the Arctic region. So I just offer those as a couple of reflections. We can continue that part on for quite some time.
Probably go down that rabbit hole. I want to change it up a little bit here. Just
okay.
You have so much to share, not only from your position here at the center, but just from your time in service.
Sure.
You were employee number 1 at the center.
Sir, employee number 1.
Employee number 1. That was just, we'll call it 2 short years ago, maybe
28 months ago.
Not that we're counting, but and so that might feel shorter or longer depending on which day it is.
Depends on the day. That's right.
You've been to many countries. You've logged thousands of air miles.
Just under 1,000 air miles. But military flying, I was about just under 5,000. But
okay. Thousands of air miles. You've worked the microphone. You've worked the stage. You've done the sidebar conversations. You've done the happy hours. You've been to the coffee shops, the Zoom rooms, the team gatherings. You've kind of done it all and been everywhere. This is when we're supposed to sing the Johnny Cash song. I think it just started listing Arctic countries, and cities, Rovaniemi.
Just part of the family. Part of the family.
Yeah, exactly. So of all those experiences that you've had across the Arctic and at Arctic gatherings, whether it's Reykjavik or Rovaniemi or in Munich or Garmisch or wherever it might be. What or when or where perhaps was the moment when you said, this is it. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing at the Stevens Center. Take us to that moment. Where was that?
So I was my Arctic experiences started back in the 1980s, early 1980s, mid 1980s, working with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, doing Arctic projects as a survey technician here for the Alaska District of the Corps on this base, so just a few blocks from here. So I got some initial Arctic experiences with the Corps, and that was specifically in Alaska at the time. But then early on in the Air Force, during the Cold War, flying long-range flights, B-52s into the Arctic region, deep out over the Arctic Ocean, and realizing at the time that if we had to eject, my chances of survival were pretty slim because we were so far from any help, and by the time help came, it probably would not have made it. But that was just a period I always try to claw my way back to Arctic in my service. It was hard to always do that because ultimately I had the privilege and challenge of serving a lot of different places. But I really got a chance to fight harder for this back on the Joint Staff when in Joint Staff J5, the Pentagon, working for General Marty Dempsey, who was the chairman at the time. General Dempsey had actually had me to represent him for Arctic events in concert with the commander of U.S. Northern Command. And then ultimately moving into U.S. European Command, and at the time following my last tenure experience on the Joint Staff, which unfortunately was a multiple hit opportunity on the Joint Staff for multiple tours, but privileged to serve in what I consider the most professional military staff on the planet. It was an exceptional experience to work there, to serve there. So then going into U.S. European Command and seeing the chance to serve as a co-chair of the Arctic Security Forces Roundtable. And I had the privilege of serving with, at the time as co-chair, with the Norwegian Defense Staff Lead, essentially the J5 of the Norwegian staff. And the two of us, when we first had the chance to take on together ASFR, we were faced with a really tough dilemma. That there was an under-resourcing for the initiatives, and I thought they were important. But I needed to simplify this to make it for each nation a chance to make meaningful contributions consistent with their appetite and their resourcing desires. And ultimately not have a lot of people doing work that's not going to actually be resourced or realized. So we redesigned and reinforced and amplified ASFR. And there's that point when I thought, as I actually was concluding my tenure of service there, and with the need to support family back in Alaska and declining future opportunities in the Air Force, thankfully it was agreed to by our chief. But then at that point, I said, this is a place I think that I've had passion since 1984 for the region, and a chance for me when I came and brought my wife back to her hometown to take on what Chapter Next looked like back in the fall of 2015. So I loved the chance to continue this effort, and because I felt like the Arctic was a region, because of the geophysical changes, that ultimately there's going to be geostrategic challenges, and I felt that I'd been trained and experienced to make hopefully a contribution to that. And so that's, I guess, when the time came to reform, redesign, rework ASFR, I felt like I figured what Chapter Next was going to look like, and then there's a long story how things changed after that, how things happened. But I'd say that would be the defining moment for focusing the future.
We could dive into details about the Arctic Security Forces Roundtable maybe in a separate episode here. There's so much to cover on that, on the history of it, the future of it, what it does, what it doesn't. I want to just tap into a little bit of who Church Key is personally. We know him as the director. We know him as a major general in the Air Force. What maybe some people don't know, we're going to cover here in some quick hits, all right? Mm-hmm. You mentioned your passion for Alaska. You get a 1, maybe 2-word answer to some of these questions, all right?
Okay, this is going to be hard, but I'll do the best I can.
All right, favorite fish to catch?
Red salmon.
That is 2 words. All right, summer or winter in
Both.
Alaska? Okay. Both there. Ski or snowshoe?
Ski.
Favorite fish to eat?
Red salmon. Oh, king salmon.
Favorite fish to give away?
Red salmon.
Okay, Kasilof or Kenai River for fishing?
Kenai by a large margin.
By a large margin. Why?
Bigger fish.
Fair enough. How many polar bears have you seen?
A few. 20-ish.
How many of those have been on a Ted Stevens Center official event?
6.
How many more do you think might be seen on a Stevens Center event?
A lot.
What's the closest you've been to a bear?
Really close.
Run or shoot?
Stand.
Stand.
And pray.
Stand. Stand
I mean,
and
like
pray.
I'll say 3 feet.
That's not the official motto of the Stevens Center, as far as I know. Stand and pray. That's not what
No,
we're.
no.
That's not what.
I was just personally doing.
Yeah, maybe your personal motto: stand and pray. If you're kneeling and praying, that might be
That's a different story. But I was hoping the bear was more scared of me than I was of him.
fair enough. We're a few days away from 2024. From what I understand, in 2024, the center hopes to get to, or aspires to get to, what we call fully operationally capable FOC. It's more jargon. We probably don't need to necessarily define what that means. Perhaps what people are more interested in is what can we expect from the Stevens Center as we ride into 2024. Elaborate perhaps on course offerings or engagements that we have coming up, or frankly, maybe just some Arctic highlights. What should our Arctic curious audience be paying attention to as the calendar flips from 23 to 24, and yet another year is going to come and go with a calendar full of Arcticness, but what should they be really zoning in on?
Well, I appreciate that's a great launching point, and we can certainly just give a cliff note or two to this. Ultimately, the center has continued to build while doing. And that's that we embarked on that campaign approach on day one. Say that in order to demonstrate relevance and to contribute, we can't wait till we have a perfectly assembled center and then put it in action. We need to learn, build, and do. And it's certainly not the most comfortable approach to take by any stretch. But we've come a long ways, and I look back to the calendar year 23 and calendar year 22 from before, and ultimately the last few months of 21, to know that we are leveraging those experiences and the processes to create sustainable, repeatable aspects of those processes to build in programs, activities, and personnel that are skillfully contributing, just as us doing our part to help contribute to the overall security and defense equation for the Department of Defense, the United States, and ultimately in concert with allies and partners. So as you look into calendar year 24, you can expect to see the Stevens Center contributing and supporting essentially the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Arctic and Global Resilience, as well as U.S. Northern Command for an Arctic Theater dialogue in the Pentagon. We'll be contributing to Arctic Frontiers in Tromsø, Norway. Planning to contribute to the Munich Security Conference regarding an Arctic Roundtable and other aspects that benefit security, the Arctic security mind interest of that important conference. Looking to provide opportunity to support field activities to include leveraging the Arctic Field Seminar at Utqiagvik, Point Barrow, between Utqiagvik and Point Barrow, the Barrow Research Center and the Barrow Environmental Observatory. Conducting, of course, the North American Arctic Security Workshop #2 on the road between Nuuk to Nome. And this is going to be this workshop focused in Iqaluit and Nunavut out on Baffin Island in northeastern Canada. And that'll be done in partnership with the North American Arctic Defense Security Network and the University of Greenland and the Royal Danish Defence College and others, including, of course, Joint Task Force North and the Canadian Coast Guard, are all interested partners to that activity. We will also be conducting a series of partner engagements with other regional centers to include European Security Seminar North. That'll be located and conducted in Garmisch-Partenkirchen in Germany at the Marshall Center. And then what we hope to be describing as our flagship event, and that will be for convening, and that would be the aspects of the Anchorage Arctic Security Conference. Again, we'll be inviting participation from our regional centers focused on the Arctic, as well as, of course, making it a true multinational activity. That's just on the engagement portion of the equation.
A lot there nonetheless. I mean, a combination of Stevens Center hosted and led events, Stevens Center partnered events the Stevens Center is going to robustly participate in. Senior Leader Dialogue in January, Arctic Frontiers, January, February, the Munich Security Conference in February, Arctic Encounter Symposium, local here to Anchorage in April, the North American Arctic Security Workshop, as you mentioned, in Baffin in May. And on the list of engagements go all the while, we'll be doing the education with the schoolhouse is doing, School of Arctic and Climate Security Studies, which Yeah, I think
Well, we have some great things coming on that. So I'm excited about, of course, our Arctic Research Orientation course, the first effort we try to conduct as a center. We have now, we've had now altogether between the RSOC and our Arctic Multi-Domain Law course, more than 1,400 graduates of our programs. And that is every regional center's first priority, if you will, is creating alumni. And that's been the case since the Marshall Center was founded in 1993. We have 4 defense-oriented courses coming down the pike, focused on Arctic domain awareness for a security practitioner, logistics, Arctic logistics for security practitioner, ultimately understanding Arctic operational risk and others. So we have, again, 4 specific courses for the defense, but also adding Arctic industry and energy and technology, and a slew of others building out that curriculum. We're looking to have a course catalog of about 23, 24 courses in our center, and then research analysis. We started with education, we followed with engagement. Now we're moving forward substantially with the research analysis portion of the equation, to include center-sponsored research and also support to the International Cooperative Engagement Program for Polar Research, ICE paper, as a primary effort, and partnering with the Chief of Naval Research and again, the multinational countries involved, and benefiting the practitioner by bringing science technology together with practitioner to assess needs and advance not only research, but also information sharing, collaboration, and technology demonstrations and more that benefit those folks that are trying to reduce risk and operate more precisely in the Arctic region. Lastly, when we look at the research part, we're also supporting the Joint Staff effort as they support NATO's multi-developmental campaign, or MCDC program, multi-capability development campaign. And then in this, we're trying to help support the lines of effort oriented towards environmental security. So a lot coming on all 3 mission areas, and of course, continuing to build out our staff, which we hope to be able to achieve our fully operational capacity in hopefully mid to latter part of fiscal year 24, and just a few months away, frankly, and making sure that we got it right before we achieve FOC, and also making sure that others can make sure that we're also in the same spot between the Pentagon and NORTHCOM.
Well, certainly a lot there. And if anybody's looking for more information about the center, we have a nice new website found at tedstevensarcticcenter.org, where everything is or will be found in the near future. Church, thanks for sharing your reflections with us today. Thanks for your service. Congratulations on the directorship.
Thank you, sir.
Congratulations on the progress of the center. And we're looking forward to what lies ahead, not only for the center, but the center's impact on the overall mission to improve and enhance and ensure our nation's well-being and security. So with that, I don't know if we have time for questions or if we're going to wrap it up.